The night, the train began to sink into the black river. Screams filled the air. Metal twisted like paper, and panic spread through every carriage. In the chaos, a young woman risked her life to save a stranger trapped inside. She had no idea the man she was pulling from the freezing water was one of the most feared mafia bosses in the city, and the boy she once loved more than anything. What happens when fate reunites two hearts in the middle of disaster? Stay with this story until the end, because the truth she discovers will change both their lives forever. Rain hammered against the windows of the late-night train as it sped across the long iron bridge. Inside carriage number 6, passengers sat quietly, some scrolling on their phones, others dozing off after a long day. Among them was Elena, a woman whose life had been built on quiet strength. She worked as a volunteer rescue diver, someone who ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. Tonight she was simply heading home after a long shift, exhausted but peaceful. Across the aisle sat a tall man dressed in a dark coat. His sharp eyes constantly scanned the carriage. He looked calm, but there was something heavy about him, like a storm hidden behind silence. No one knew his name. No one knew that he was Victor Romano, a powerful mafia boss, feared across the city. Victor kept his identity hidden. Tonight he was traveling alone, trying to escape the endless chaos of the criminal world for just a few hours. But fate had other plans. Suddenly a violent explosion echoed from the front of the train. The entire carriage lurched violently. People screamed. Lights flickered. The train screeched against the tracks as it lost control, sliding off the bridge and plunging partially into the freezing river below. Water rushed into the lower carriages. Panic spread instantly. Passengers fought to escape, shattering windows and pushing toward the exits. The cold river poured inside like a monster swallowing everything. Elena's heart pounded, but instead of running, she did what she had always done. She moved toward the danger. "Everyone move to the top carriage," she shouted. Her voice cut through the chaos. Some passengers followed her instructions, while others were too terrified to think. Then Elena heard something, a metallic banging sound. Someone was trapped. She rushed toward the back of the carriage, where the floor had tilted downward into the freezing water. Half the train was already submerged. Through the rising water, she saw a man pinned under a twisted metal beam. It was Victor. Blood ran down his forehead, but he was still conscious, struggling to free himself. Elena froze for a moment. Something about his eyes felt strangely familiar. But there was no time to think. The water was rising fast. She dove into the freezing river inside the carriage and swam toward him. "Hold still," she shouted. Victor tried to push the metal beam away, but failed. "I'm stuck. Leave me," he said weakly. But Elena shook her head. No one gets left behind. With all her strength, she pulled a small emergency tool from her rescue bag and began forcing the metal loose. The train groaned loudly as it sank deeper. Water reached their shoulders. Victor stared at the woman trying to save him. Something about her voice, her courage, her eyes. It stirred a distant memory from years ago. Finally, the metal shifted. Elena pulled Victor free, but the moment he stood, the carriage suddenly collapsed deeper into the river. The current pulled them both under. For several terrifying seconds, darkness surrounded them. Elena grabbed Victor's arm and kicked toward the broken window above. They burst out into the cold night air, just as rescue lights began flashing across the bridge. Helicopters hovered above. Emergency teams shouted commands. Elena dragged Victor toward floating wreckage until rescue boats arrived. Both of them collapsed onto the rescue raft, gasping for breath. Victor looked at the woman who had just saved his life, and then he saw it clearly. Her face, older, stronger, but unmistakable. He whispered. Her eyes widened. She looked closer at the man she had risked everything to save. And suddenly the past came rushing back. Victor, the boy she had once loved, the boy who had disappeared 10 years ago, now one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the city. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, because both of them knew this rescue was not just an accident. It was fate pulling two broken lives back together. But the truth behind Victor's life, and the enemies chasing him, would soon place Elena in more danger than she had ever imagined. Hours later, the hospital corridors were quiet. Rain continued falling outside as doctors treated survivors from the train disaster. Elena sat in the waiting room, wrapped in a blanket, still shaking from the freezing water. Her mind couldn't stop replaying the moment on the raft. Victor, her first love, the boy who had once promised they would escape their small town together and build a better life. But 10 years ago he vanished without explanation. No goodbye, no letter, just gone. And now he had returned, as a mafia boss. The hospital door opened slowly. Victor stepped inside. His injuries were bandaged, but his powerful presence filled the room. Elena stood up. Silence hung between them like unfinished words. "You disappeared," she finally said softly. Victor looked down. "I had no choice." Years of pain hid behind those 4 words. He explained everything. After leaving town, he had been pulled into the world of organized crime by powerful men who saw his intelligence and ambition. Over time, he rose through the ranks, not because he loved power, but because survival demanded it. But every success cost him something: his freedom, his peace, and the woman he loved. "I stayed away to protect you," he admitted. Elena's eyes filled with emotion. "And tonight I saved you," she said. Victor smiled faintly. Looks like fate had other plans. But Victor's expression soon turned serious. The train explosion wasn't an accident. Elena frowned. "What do you mean?" Victor lowered his voice. "Someone tried to kill me tonight." The realization hit her instantly. The disaster, the explosion, the bridge, it had all been planned. Victor had enemies powerful enough to destroy a train just to eliminate him. And now, Elena had saved him, which meant she might now be a target too. Victor stepped closer. "You need to stay away from me," he said. But Elena shook her head. "I already jumped into a sinking train for you. I think it's too late for that." For the first time in years, Victor laughed quietly. The sound carried warmth he had almost forgotten. Over the next few days, Elena helped the survivors of the crash, while Victor secretly arranged protection around the hospital. Something slowly began to change inside him. The ruthless mafia boss everyone feared began remembering who he used to be. The boy who believed life could be different. Elena reminded him of that. And one evening, standing on the hospital rooftop overlooking the city lights, Victor made a decision. "I'm leaving the mafia," he said. Elena looked shocked. "You can't just walk away." Victor nodded. "But I can choose who I become next." It wouldn't be easy. Powerful enemies would try to stop him. But for the first time in years, Victor had something stronger than fear: hope. Because the woman who saved his life also reminded him that redemption was still possible. Months later, Victor began helping authorities dismantle the very criminal network he once controlled. It was dangerous, but slowly the city began to change. And one quiet evening, back at the same river where the train had nearly taken his life, Victor stood beside Elena, watching the sunset. "You didn't just save me from the train," he said softly. "You saved the man I used to be." Elena smiled. "Sometimes people don't need saving," she replied. "They just need someone who reminds them who they really are." Victor took her hand, and in that moment they both understood something powerful. Love doesn't always arrive at the perfect time. Sometimes it returns after storms, disasters, and broken years. But when it does, it can rebuild even the most damaged hearts. And sometimes, the person you rescue ends up rescuing you too.